everyone, my name is Mason Stoops, and today I'm here with Guitar Center checking out the new Supro Delegate Custom and Ambassador Custom. Both of these amps feature some premium components such as Mercury magnetics transformers, Mallory capacitors, and precision matched EHX tubes. First, we're going to check out the Delegate Custom, which is a 25-watt Class A amplifier. Features a pair of 6v6 tubes and a 12-inch Celestion greenback speaker. Diving right in, I'm just going to start with the basic kind of clean tone so you can hear the all-around sound of this amp. I'm going to keep the EQ pretty much at noon, just so you can get a good picture of what this amp sounds like. As far as a clean tone and like kind of the traditional Supro and Valco territory, it's not maybe as purely hi-fi as some more popular amps, but it's certainly, there's a lot of character. There's maybe a little bit of breakup in the high end, which is cool. It's just something that is a little more touch sensitive in a way that's not exactly, like I said, high fidelity. It's just more, there's a little bit of dirt, but it's only there when you need it. And that's kind of cool, to where the more you dig in, the more the amp kind of reminds you that you're playing a Supro amp. It's not the cleanest, but it's maybe one of the coolest. To me, it's a good amp, especially like a good clean sound on a good amp. It works for the whole guitar, and dialing in a great amp so that it can work for the whole guitar is important. Another rad feature on the Delegate is definitely the tube-driven spring reverb, which is like as old school of an effect as you can get. And it's just a classic reverb sound, a little splashier, a little kind of, I don't want to say surfy, but it's definitely nostalgic. And then I just turned this all knobby right up. I guess in a world of more and more modern sounding reverbs and cleaner sounding reverbs, it's really cool to hear a reverb in a new amp like this that's very springy, almost kind of dirty in a way. It reminds me of like a Link Wray kind of thing, or even a Hank Marvin kind of reverb, where it's really present and it almost becomes part of the guitar part instead of just casual effect. So I don't know, there's just something really cool about a really character-driven reverb sound. So this is my 52 Les Paul. Obviously it's not stock. It's mostly stock, I guess. The pickups are original, but it's been through a lot, and it sounds amazing, especially into an amp like this where you get to just turn all the knobs all the way up. So let's do that. Sounds fucking sick. What's more fun than just turning an amp up like all the way? Especially, I like a guitar like this. Les Paul to me is cool because these old P90s are particularly microphonic. So you really hear kind of just all of the harmonics coming out of the amp and that relationship that a cranked amp and like a cranked guitar have together. For that last bit, I was playing with the EQ kind of with, I mean, basically the mids were pushed all the way, and trebles about a little past noon. But let me show you kind of some of the other sounds that this EQ can do in this amp, because it's actually pretty versatile. First, I'm gonna start with kind of a still mids pushed sound, and then I'll like reset the whole EQ, and you can kind of hear more of like maybe like a small amp, like an old school Stones or Zeppelin kind of sound. Maybe just push treble, so it's like really treble boosted. Yeah, there's a lot of amps that I feel they definitely have EQ knobs, and they maybe do something. They're maybe kind of subtle, but you can really dial in like a crazy array of sounds on this one amp. And to me, it's especially cool because there's so many different flavors of that old Supro amp sound. And of course, that depended on how it was recorded and what microphones they were using. But nonetheless, just that difference in a huge distortion with all the low end and those mids like in your face, versus that kind of like AM radio rock and roll guitar sound that's like no bass and super cut and almost like the speaker sounds like it's this big. You know, it's so cool that it sounds good doing both. Usually you kind of have to have an amp that does one or an amp that does the other, and you kind of choose when it's right to use one or the other. But this, you could really get both and have fun doing both. But if you're dialing in the big distortion, or if you're going for that old kind of AM radio sound, like the Delegate definitely does both in a way that's super musical and definitely fun to play. If you go back and you listen to a lot of those early Zeppelin recordings, especially those Zeppelin recordings where Jimmy's using his Supro amp, if you get those isolated tracks, the guitar is actually pretty small sounding. There's not a lot of low end, and it's not even that distorted, but it's in the mix with John Paul Jones's bass that's just like super huge and super fat and super distorted. And it's the combination of those two sounds together. And listening to those recordings is kind of what taught me that like sometimes the smaller distortion sound is bigger in the mix and bigger in the long run. So it's important to have an amp that can do that if you know, you really want to be authentic to that era and to that sound. To me, the kind of the last mark of a really great amp is the relationship it has with your guitar's volume knob. You always hear those interviews from the like all the legends back in the day talking about how they just turn their amps all the way up and then use the volume knob on their guitar. And when I first was getting into guitar, that was so confusing because none of my amps really did that thing. But when you have a really great tube amplifier that can just really push the speaker and really push the tubes, suddenly your volume knob becomes a really useful tool. And that whole, like it starts to make sense how they were using the volume knob in that way. So I could just show you that now even with this amp, because this amp like crushes that sound. So I'll start with the volume knob all the way up and then slowly bring it down. You can hear how it cleans up and just the variety of tones you get and the different colors that are available, even without even touching the knobs on the amp. Hopefully you can hear for yourselves just that even as I'm turning the volume down on the guitar, you're not really losing volume and you're not losing character. It's more of just a different color palette as the knob goes down, and it definitely cleans up, which is cool and it's useful. But there's just such a cool array of tones that I didn't even used to know my guitar had before I had like a really great amp that I could utilize my volume knob in that way. And this new Supro definitely gets you there. So that was the Delegate Custom. Now we're gonna switch over to the Ambassador Custom, which is a 210 combo. two 10-inch speakers that have been custom voiced by Celestion. It has a 6L6 power section that is switchable between Class A-B at 50 watts or Class A at 35 watts. So I'm going to start out in a clean setting in the Class A-B 50 watt mode. Now I'm going to switch to Class A and play pretty much the same part. So in a clean setting, the differences between Class A and Class A-B are going to be pretty subtle. But if you're in Class A, like I just was, it's definitely more mid-forward. It's a little more articulate and touch sensitive in a way that's really cool for finger picking. But if we were switching to maybe a more high gain or more distortion setting, you really start to hear the differences, where A-B might be a little more mid-scooped and kind of even sounding, and Class A is really raunchy, and you really hear that high end and you hear the breakup in a cool way. And let's go ahead and do that now, starting back in Class A-B. This. Class A. So as you just heard, there's definitely some differences between A-B and A. A-B, as we said before, it's mid-scooped and it's maybe a little more even overall in sound. Going to Class A, there's immediately a little more compression, there's a little more kind of character in the distortion on the high end. It just kind of jumps out of the amp in a little bit of a different way. And simplest way to put it, Class A-B is going to be more of a classic California sound, a little mid-scooped and maybe better for pedals, versus Class A is more of an in-your-face kind of mid-forward, like old school, like Chicago blues sound. That's really great if you just want to turn your amp up and go for it. I'm gonna go ahead and switch to my Jazzmaster now, just to kind of get more of a Fender sound for all of you Fender fans out there. So now that I've got my Jazzmaster, I'm gonna show you guys just a little bit of the tube-driven spring reverb that the Ambassador has. Sounds like this. I love the reverb on both of these amps. It just has such a unique character that's not lo-fi, but really distinct. Let me go ahead and just turn that up even more, and I'll show you something where I can kind of dig into the guitar and you really get to hear the tail and the way this reverb interacts with the guitar and the sound. So basically there, I had the reverb like cranked, like all the way up. And that combined with like a more percussive kind of playing where you're letting the guitar kind of sit behind the reverb almost, you really hear how unique the reverb quality is in this amp. So to wrap it up, I guess if you were looking for just a straightforward killer rock and roll guitar amplifier that also has amazing cleans and certainly its own character, the Delegate 25 watts is a pretty perfect gigging and studio companion. Now, if you wanted some more features and an amp that was maybe a higher headroom and had some more versatility, the Ambassador is definitely the way to go. It still has that Supro quality and it still has that unique character, but it's definitely gonna be something that will serve you in the long run in terms of a wider variety of sounds, and certainly more volume as well. A single 12-inch speaker is something we all know and love. It's familiar, it's full frequency, and it'll always get the job done. Versus 210s, personally, I love 210s. The low end is unique, the high end is unique. They serve the sound of a guitar in such a cool way. 10s will always give you just a different quality than maybe most amps that you're used to. And so I always lean towards 10s just for that factor alone. But both are great, both serve different things, and I encourage you to check them both out to see which maybe you like more or works more for your sound. A big part of the charm of those original Supro amps is that they were kind of a budget amplifier. They were more affordable and not necessarily made cheaper, but made to be more accessible to more guitar players. And all the combination of all those parts made them the unique sound and made them the unique amplifiers that we all know and love today. If you pick up one of these amplifiers now, you'll be immediately impressed with the build quality. You'll be impressed with the quality of all the components. It's certainly a higher quality amplifier that still gives you that original Supro character and that original Supro sound. So if you'd like to learn more about either the Supro Delegate Custom or the Ambassador Custom, you should head to guitarcenter.com. You can call one of their expert gear advisors or just stop into your local GC.